Hey, Kate? Oh, Sergeant Brewer, is she there? We can't hear you if you're talking. Oh, okay, Ms. Branson? Also on mute.
Grateful as always.
Grateful, okay. Caroline, how about you?
Very thankful for all the hard work you guys are all doing all the time, not just here, but everywhere else. So thank you.
All right, I think I almost got everyone. So let's move on to our minutes from our last meeting. I think Carlos has attendance from everyone. Let's move on to the minutes. Does anyone have any edits for the last meeting? Okay, does anybody want to move to adopt?
So moved.
Any second?
Sure.
All right. All in favor?
Aye.
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 So we're good on that, Carlos.
Sounds good.
All right, and I'm not going to take too much more time. I'm going to introduce our Takoma Park Mayor, Kate Stewart. Thank you so much for joining us today and discussing the traffic enforcement efforts that you all have going on. So without further ado, I'll pass it over to you.
Great. Well, thank you very much for having me this evening. I'm glad to be here. And really, as I said before, thank you so much for the work you're doing. First, I want to start with some background. In Takoma Park, we do have as you all know, our own police department, and we're continually reviewing and evaluating police in the city. Specifically, in July of 2017, as we were beginning our search for a new police chief, we took that time to have the council establish goals and priorities for the new police chief and the department. Hiring in the city is done by the city manager, and our city manager oversees personnel. But we thought it was very important for the city council, as we had this opportunity to really set the priorities for the department, and also to be able to have this resolution on our goals in order to hold our next chief accountable to them. So some of the top 3 goals we set for our department, we weren't limited to these, but I think they're important for our conversation today, is promoting public safety while upholding the rights and dignity of all residents, adherence to the guardian rather than the warrior model of policing, and fostering a culture of transparency and accountability. In addition, that same year in 2017, the council formally committed to forwarding a racial equity and applying an equity framework to our decision-making. Members of the council and the city staff, including our police department, attended trainings on implementing racial equity in decision-making. So as part of all those efforts, to fulfill those goals, we know that our police department began implementing changes in traffic stops in 2018. As you all know very well, traffic stops are among the most common form of interaction between the police and residents. For most police departments, and ours included prior to 2018, traffic stops were often conducted by patrol officers in the course of their duties, rather than as part of strategic efforts to address safety. And I do know that our prior police chief, not our current one, but our prior one, there were a sort of a sentiment of, stopping people just to kind of see what then could come out of that, or I guess they're called fishing expeditions. But in 2018, as I mentioned, we made significant changes to strategy and tactics, making a conscious effort in the city to reduce the number of stops by declining to make stops for less serious violations. We see that between 2015 and 2020, the number of stops made by our officers declined from 8,000 annually to just under 1,600. So we had an 80% decrease in stops. We also saw a decline in citations, down from 4,010 in 2015 to 642 in 2020, a decline of 84%. Two policy changes in our department really aided in this drop in stops and citations. The first is, as I mentioned before, was a refocus on traffic enforcement. So again, in 2018, the department moved away from random traffic enforcement to targeted enforcement, utilizing traffic collision data as well as resident complaints. The department focused traffic enforcement in specific areas in the city. And while the number of stops were reduced, the quality and impact of the stops improved. We can see this through our collision data over the 3 years from 2018 to 2020 shows a reduction overall in collisions in the city compared to the same time to the time period of 2015 and 2017. The second thing is that we revamped our evaluation and reward system in the city. In 2018, the department changed the evaluation system to focus on community engagement and problem solving over traffic and criminal enforcement. This led to officers not feeling pressured to make non-impactful traffic stops and arrests. This was consistent with promoting quality targeted enforcement and not just quantity. We still have work to do, but when we look at also the breakdown of stops by demographics, we see that we are doing some improvements, but again, still have some work to do. So in 2015, the police stopped 3,911 Black residents and 1,903 Hispanic residents. Compared to in 2020, it was down to 663 Black residents and 511 Hispanic residents. And while the relative stop rates of Black people were less in 2020 than 2015, Black people did represent 48% of stops in 2015 and 41.6% in 2020. But we do see an increase in stops among Hispanic residents, representing 23.6% of stops in 2015 and 32% of stops in 2020. White residents who were stopped, their proportions stayed about the same from 2015 to 2020. So as I said, we still have work to do in the city because we are still seeing those disparities in stops. But overall, what we are seeing is that we're reducing the number of interactions between our police department and residents, and that's not impacting public safety, but in fact, we're actually, through our collision data, seeing that we're doing a better job through the targeted enforcement. Two things I just want to kind of underscore is regarding expectations and setting clear expectations for the police department. And that really goes back to the goals that the council set in 2017. That is something that our police chief refers back to many times as he's making changes in the department, and also as he was thinking about the traffic enforcement and how we moved our policy there. The other area is accountability, holding officers accountable to those overall goals. And one of the things that we see is that if you look at officers and the number of traffic stops they are making sure that if we have officers who have higher stops than others, actually questioning why the stops are being made, to make sure that officers are not doing stops for fishing expeditions, and making sure that practice is stopped. Again, those are all things that we have put in place over the last few years. I'm happy to answer questions. I'm sorry our police chief was unable to be with us today, so to the best of my ability, I will answer your questions. And if I can't, I will find the information and provide it to you. And I know all of you have our more detailed report that looked at the statistics on traffic stops over the years. And just thank you again for this opportunity.
Thank you so much, Mayor Stewart. And we really appreciate your insight and the work that y'all have been doing that helps us do our work here in the county. I know that Robin, you went off mute, so I was wondering.
Sure.
Okay, cool.
So it's quite impressive that you've managed to reduce the number of stops by more than 80% with improved collision outcomes. That's very encouraging. It suggests that there are a vast number of stops made that are an inconvenience for the, or at best for the driver, and a cost for the county that simply are unnecessary, and those resources could be used elsewhere. Still, I have a couple of questions. Question is, how did the police department take this radical change of direction? How easy was it to persuade them that this might be a better way to do policing?
So again, I'll go back to the priorities and goals that we set for our police department before Chief Duvall was hired, which was very important because in fact, he was the one who put these changes into place. The city council had, set these broad policies, and when he came in and looked at our racial equity work, as well as the goals we have for our police department, this was one area that he put changes in.
Did you lose police officers?
Oh, we, over the last few years, we have, I will say, officers have decided to move other places. We have changed the culture of policing in Takoma Park.
Thank you, Ms. Branson. I know you have your hand up.
Yeah, hi, Mayor Stewart. I wanted to ask about complaints. During this time period compared to the previous time period, did you notice any increase, decrease, whatever, statistically significant difference in the number of citizen complaints regarding the police?
That's a great question. I'd have to go back and look at resident complaints for the police department. I know overall, we also changed how we do resident complaints over the last few years. When I first became mayor, it was difficult, quite frankly, to put a complaint in. You had to go to the police department to complain about the police department, which wasn't very easy. And so now we've made it much easier to do. But Ms. Branson, I can get you more information on that.
Okay, thank you. On the traffic stop data, what if anything, steps are you all taking to resolve what are clearly continuing racial inequities? I mean, what's the thinking there?
Mm-hmm. Well, one of the things that we had last year was a reimagining public safety task force report. And unfortunately, we did not have a specific, they came back with over 50 recommendations. We didn't get a specific one from them on the traffic stops. And that's something that we're looking at now, and are very open to suggestions and hope, and perhaps you as a group, would also provide some suggestions on how to do this.
Thank you.
Thank you. Does anyone have any other questions? Robin, go ahead.
Yeah, Mayor Stewart, have you looked at the demographics of automated tickets in Takoma Park? Because that might give you something of a baseline.
Mm-hmm. We can do, yeah, I can ask if our department can look at that. Yes.
Yeah, that might help. They're not overtly biased anyway.
Thank you. And I know, Eric, you have your hand up as well. Go ahead.
Thank you, Nadia. Mayor, you mentioned some of the racial and ethnic data regarding the issuance of citations and stops. Do you have any data regarding accidents? Our report in figure 7 shows that the accident numbers for Hispanic and Black drivers in the county is higher than their proportion in the population.
I am checking the report. I'm not sure if it's in the report I have on collision data. Sorry, I'm just, that is also something I can see if we have available. It's
Thank you.
not in the report I have in front of me.
Thank you.
Okay, and Sergeant Brewer, I know you also have your hand up. Go ahead.
I'm sorry, can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can now.
Okay, I'm still struggling with technical difficulties, 100% operator error on my end, so I apologize and appreciate your patience. Just one question, and I think it might just be semantics, and I apologize. It's really just for information. I want to make sure I have the right information based on what you said. You're saying when you're giving the statistics of residents that were pulled over, is that specific? Does that mean there's more traffic stops, or are you just identifying any traffic stop as a resident? So I imagine you pull over more people than just residents.
Oh yeah, I just used the word resident. Yeah, people, resident. Yes, sorry. You're right. Actually, that's a great point because a number, we do have data that on whether or not someone is a resident of the city versus the number of people we stop who are not residents of the city. So yes, you're right. I was using resident, but in the broader sense of the word.
No, that's fine. Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate it. Again, just for clarification for me. So I appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, actually, just in case people are interested, for our traffic stops, 50% of our traffic stops are Montgomery County residents, 28% are Prince George's, 17% are out of state. And I think a small percentage Howard County. And Carlos had asked for the report that goes into more specific data, so I put that in the chat as well.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. Does anyone have any other questions? Anything they'd like to add? I know Mayor Stewart is going to get back to us with a couple of pieces of information. So I don't know if anybody else has anything they'd like to add before we move forward. Okay, I don't see any hands up. Great, we're moving fast today.
Thank you, Kate.
All right, I'm gonna pop off. Thank you, Nadia, and everyone else. And if other questions come up as you're reviewing the report, we've just made all these data available. And so there's a lot there and willing to dig into it more if you have further questions. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much for coming and
Thank you,
joining.
Mayor.
Thanks.
All right, so I know there was a lot of conversation around the traffic enforcement recommendations. The next item that we have on the agenda is to vote to finalize these recommendations. So I obviously wasn't on the last call. I don't know if there's anything else that anyone wants to add before we move to the vote.
Hi, this is Caroline. Can I just, I
Go
thought
ahead.
it was a great report. I'm really impressed with all the hard work. I was wondering if it was possible, or maybe it's too late at this point. It would be really nice if the recommendations were summarized at the front end. Like here are the 5 recommendations. It seems in reading it, they're kind of dispersed a bit and one section has a recommendation and anyway, I think for maximum impact for the readers, hopefully in the police department and the county council to see like a kind of executive summary right at the front end might really make it a little bit more user friendly.
We can certainly add that as a good idea, Caroline.
Sorry, Robin. I know Eric, before you go ahead, I know Eric had his hand up. He might have had a question. Go ahead, Eric. You're on mute.
Thank you. Perhaps I was prematurely lowering my hand. Robin, subcommittee members, very, very good report, very impressive, really well done. I'm I'm going to support the report, but I have an observation or a concern about the question of enforcement for seatbelt violations. I was looking at some of the data. Seatbelt enforcement seems to be effective according to the NHTSA studies that are done on seatbelts. Using a seatbelt reduces the risk of death in an accident by about 45% for people, drivers or front seat passengers. Reduce the risk of injury by about 50%. It's a significant public health safety feature. And to the extent that our report is so well grounded on the question of what produces safety, what strategies produce safety, it's, you know, at least my quick read of the data is that the states that do primary enforcement for seatbelts have a something like a 9 to 10 percentage point increase in seatbelt use compared to the states where it's secondary enforcement, where a seatbelt violation would not be the basis for a stop. And so that would, I simply that's one, that would be a recommendation I don't think is the consistent with the sort of the overall thrust of a data-oriented approach toward traffic safety.
I do accept the broad data. I guess I would say that we would need to do, or the police department would need to do careful analysis to look at where click it and ticket actually works. One imagines that it works better where on higher speed roads, where collisions are more dangerous, and that, you know, click it and ticket in the local neighborhoods is not actually having an impact on safety. So, or having a negligible impact, or that's what I would hypothesize. But the police department or the county council should be looking to do more detailed analysis. I guess I would also say, as with any other kind of stop, there is a cost. There's a reputational cost for the police department hassling people, and there's a financial cost because it takes police officer time and citizen time. And so I would want to see more detail before, you know, before agreeing that this is something that should be changed. I think it's certainly something the police department should be doing, this kind of analysis that's prompted by your question. I guess I would say that on balance right now, I would not suggest including seatbelts as a primary cause. I understand. I mean, I see the data. It's a marginal call, but I guess I would say no. Let's try and change the culture in the police department first, and then we can think about, you know, detailed pieces.
Thank you, Rob. I mean, obviously, some of these are close calls, but
Yeah.
very, very good report.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Ms. Branson, I know you have kind of.
Yeah, I just need to be clear, under Maryland law is seatbelt enforcement primary and secondary reason for a stop. I thought it was secondary.
Anyone know?
In the state of Maryland, as far as I know, in the state of Maryland, it's a primary offense. It is a primary offense in the state of Maryland. And so, I just want to add, and I understand this is just my opinion, but until you've seen a wreck where somebody goes through a window because they weren't wearing a seatbelt, I understand there's a cultural change that people want to see, but there's certain things you guys have to be okay with. And I think allowing and telling people that a seatbelt is a secondary offense is, from my standpoint, having seen those wrecks and been there for notifications, it's just such a safety feature. I would be against it, but that's just my 2 cents.
Well, I mean, I think it's a question for the state legislature, quite frankly. And so, I think we should be mindful of that fact that this is not, whether it's primary or secondary, yes, can have an impact on a number of factors, as it relates to this report. I'm not, I'm not wed to, to it being eliminated and or adjusted. It so but I think, maybe a footnote could be added to clarify whether that it is in fact a primary offense in Maryland.
Okay.
Can I actually just respond sort of generally? We're putting forward recommendations for, and we were quite careful not to try and get into a detailed discussion of every offense that should be regarded as a minor offense. We piggybacked on the OLO report, but I would imagine that this will be a matter for debate in the county council if they adopt some of this. And I guess what I'm saying is, I don't think we have to specifically resolve this issue. We can put a note in the report, and Ms. Brewer's point is perfectly real, and I'm quite happy to include that in the report too, to say this is an area of judgment and balance, and it's going to be up to the county council to decide, what they want to do with it. I don't think we necessarily, I was trying to avoid us having to decide every single offense that is going to be a minor offense or a major offense. I think that's beyond our scope. What we're trying to do is to provide broad direction to the police department.
Thank you, Robin. Mr. Ricks, I know you have your hand up, and I'm going to try to wrap it up after Mr. Ricks because I want to be respectful of Council President Alborno's time. We're going to move to that item after this so that we can hear from him, and then we'll move on to the rest of our things. Go ahead, Mr. Ricks.
Sure. I have a problem supporting any recommendation that takes safety out of being a #1 priority. I have seen accidents, witnessed accidents where the people did not have on seatbelts. I've seen, and in that accident, I lost a nephew who got thrown out of the car and then run over by another car. So anything that says safety on it, I think is a priority, and we don't need to play with that as a stop. It is, if they have these, stops where they set up for alcohol use and people come through, they don't have on seat belts, then people have to pay the price for the piper. Also, if these stops are on people on the cell phone, that's safety. And so any report that does not include safety as a primary reason, I can't support.
Right. And thank you for that. I think we all agree that safety is indeed important, but as Robin said, I think adding the note in terms of what our scope is and what we're trying to, what we intend with these recommendations in terms of traffic enforcement, I think is very specific to the structure and the culture and what we were trying to do with this particular recommendations. And we all agree, Mr. Ricks, absolutely, safety should be first when it comes to traffic enforcement. So I'm gonna go ahead and move to vote on this. One, adding the summary that was recommended at the beginning of the recommendations, and with the note in terms of what our scope is of our recommendations. Is that?
I second.
Okay, thank you, Caroline. Second, anyone else? Okay.
You want us to vote in the chat?
Yes, please vote in the chat. Thank you.
The chat seems to be only directed to Carlos this evening. I see there isn't everyone.
I'm seeing everyone.
No,
Yeah.
just do the drop down.
It's
Yeah.
either everyone or Carlos. Got it. Thank you.
Okay. 3, 4. Okay, we have 6. And please keep adding your votes, and that is okay. So the recommendation passes. I'm going to go ahead and move to our last item, the referral of Bill 4921, because we have Council President Albornoz here, if that's okay with everyone.
Can I just
the
ask
recommend-
a question, Nadia, about the hiring and discipline committee's recommendation? Is that to follow or?
Right, are we voting on that?
So
Because
yeah,
we could-
we're going to
We
vote on
could
that.
perhaps dispense with that fairly quickly.
Okay, we're
And
gonna
then-
move through that quick. Let's do that. So let's vote on those 2 things, and then let's get on with the last bill. So we have both recommendations for Bill 1721 and 3921. So let's vote on 1721 first, if that's okay with you all. So if everyone is okay.
Oh, wait, well, the recommendations were combined though for both.
I'm sorry,
I
Alicia.
have a question.
Sorry.
I have a question on how many members of the committee or the commission are on?
We have quorum. We have 6.
6, I thought it was 13 people on.
We currently don't have 13 because we had a couple of people resign.
It's a majority.
There's 9 members present currently, Mr. Rick.
Oh, my apologies, Carlos.
That's okay.
And Jen, I know you just sent a message inquiring about reviewing what we approved. I know that was sent out to folks. Go
I
ahead.
thought that, are we voting on, I just want to be clear, I read both reports and it said we're not in favor or against these. Is that what we are approving?
Yes, yes. We reviewed the bills, and we neither support nor oppose, but have some comments about them that the council could take into account.
Agree, as where I am, there are some parts of both. Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, so we're going to, I'm going to move to vote on approving the recommendations as they are that were sent by the Hiring and Discipline Subcommittee. So if you all can go ahead and vote on the chat. Okay, and I think everyone voted. Correct me if I'm wrong, Carlos. I think we're good. All right, that was short and simple.
The only vote that I didn't see was Robin's.
I think his was first.
Oh, okay. Thanks.
All right, so Council President Albornoz, thank you so much for joining us again for the 50th time. We apologize. We have so many things going on and that we try to get to every single time we meet. But we are referring this particular bill 4921 to our Hiring and Discipline Subcommittee. But before we refer it, we wanted to give you the space to talk about this bill since we know it's important to you. So if you can go ahead, and I'll pass it over to you.
Sorry, Nadia, did the recommendations pass by the commission?
Yes, ma'am, they did.
Okay, great.
All right. Well, first, thank you, Nadia, so much. We're going to have to make this part 1 of 2 because unfortunately I have a hard stop at 7:20. I'm on a panel discussion that actually started at 7 o'clock, but meeting with all of you was really important to me. And so I let the organizers of that event know I'm going to be late. Sorry about that. Sorry about that. So just a couple of disclaimers, and I heard Alicia's dog. We actually just got one ourselves. And so he's an 8-month-old rescue, very active. I saw Susan Farag's dog do a cameo in his screenshot a little while ago. So apologies in advance if he makes some noise, but he's actually been great so far. We're 3 weeks in and so far so good. I came for 3 reasons tonight. And again, I will be back again soon. The first is, quite frankly, just to acknowledge and thank all of your hard work. Susan and Carlos have really done a great job of keeping us abreast of the incredibly important discourse you have had in these meetings. And I'm so happy that I had the opportunity this evening to just see a microcosm of that. I think the world of Mayor Kate Stewart and the fact that you had invited her to come and speak, and the very thoughtful questions and discussion that ensued after her presentation is exactly what at least I had in mind when we nominated all of you unbelievably impressive and dedicated advocates and volunteers. So that was terrific. And the discussion that you all had now on the recommendations with regards to traffic enforcement, I can't wait. And I look forward to reading the overall report now that it has been approved by all of you. And I know that there has been an expression made to the council that we are not paying attention, and we are. And I view your role as not just to advise and guide and do a deep dive into issues that are complex and have a lot of layers to them, and that really represent generations of change that needed to happen long ago, while acknowledging the difficulty and challenges of the job that our law enforcement officials have to undertake. And you all are bridge makers. And so I think this is an important opportunity for us to demonstrate to the community that we are being thoughtful in making sure that we have a diverse set of voices heard, and that we have as many opinions as is reasonable before we deliberate over various bills. This council, as you all know, has been very aggressive since the beginning of we are officially the 19th council in the history of Montgomery County. And we recently got an award from the NAACP specifically for the council's work in looking at criminal justice reform. And several of my colleagues have been really out in front and true leaders on these issues. And it has been a pleasure to work with all of them. It's also been a pleasure and privilege to continue to work with Montgomery County Police as well. Some of you may be aware, I actually served with Ms. Branson in the previous administration. She is a rock star, as you all have come to find out. But I had the opportunity to work side by side with a number of law enforcement officials who were actually promoted and have since received significant promotions. I met Chief Jones when he was still in the 4th District, and we were working on youth engagement opportunities. And Assistant Chief Dinesh Patel is somebody I've been working with a long time as well. So I've seen firsthand how when done well and when done right, which I think we do much more often than we don't, our law enforcement officials have worked hard to go deep in communities. I'll give you just a couple of silly but fun examples. There was this one event that I attended when I was still with the rec department. It was a partnership with the Street Outreach Network led by the incredible Luis Cardona. And the balloon guy didn't show up for an event with over 200 kids. Disaster ensued. You know, the kids were very upset. 2 of the officers on hand jumped on YouTube and learned how to make balloons, you know, just by watching a couple of videos, and were able to keep things going. That kind of engagement, that kind of humanity goes so far in establishing relationships with community. Now, to be fair, the kids had never seen a dog with 5 legs, but I give a lot of credit to the officers who attempted to make those balloons for those kids. And I've shared this publicly from the dais several times, but I'll share it with all of you this evening. I did have the opportunity to go on a ride along about 6 months ago. It had been a while since I had been on one. And what I saw was really enlightening. It was just kind of further reminded me of the complexity of the job, having to process reams of policy and procedure and law and have that be done in real time. And I also shared a story recently when I spoke at the graduation of the 73rd session just last week, where one of the things I mentioned was when I was a boy in the 1980s, my parents sold their house in Gaithersburg and my grandparents sold their house in Silver Spring, and we moved to Bethesda. And within a few months, we befriended our neighbor, who was a woman who was in her 80s, was widowed. And from time to time, I would help mow her lawn. I would help her bring in her groceries from her car. And within a couple of years of us moving to that house, she was tragically and brutally murdered. And it turns out I was probably one of the last people that spoke to her. And I remember the detective and the Montgomery County police officers that came to our house to interview us just to try and glean some information in the case. And I remember how terrified I was about the whole situation, coming face to face with an evil that I didn't know was possible. That detective in particular showed patience, showed calm, and showed a humanity that was so helpful. And I wasn't, unfortunately, able to provide any information that was especially helpful in that case, but I'll never forget how that officer made me feel. And what I shared with the graduates from the 73rd session was their training is so important, will continue throughout their entire careers, but it's that humanity that we need to acknowledge to make sure that we are taking care of those especially most vulnerable among us. And the last thing I'll mention before briefly, and again, this is part one of two parts, and I should mention also as well, I should have done this at the beginning, but my Deputy Chief of Staff, Lillian Cruz, has attended several of your guys' meetings. She's in the audience today. She's outstanding. She is our lead on the Public Safety Committee, working closely with Susan. She has been tremendous. And prior to working in my office, spent 17 years working for Congressman Van Hollen, now Senator Van Hollen. And so she's well known and well trusted in multiple communities, is one of the go-to people on the council for immigration related issues, because it's an issue she knows very well. But I'll mention just briefly as I wrap up here, the bill that Councilmember Hucker and I co-introduced as co-leads with Councilmember Katz co-sponsoring. We do, and it is real, have a significant recruitment and retention issue among our officers. And that's a problem for a lot of reasons. If the pool that we are drawing from is so severely diminished, then all of our collective hard work in establishing policy and procedure, transparency, if the right people aren't applying for these jobs and securing them, then that's a problem too. And so we're thinking through creative and reasonable ways to incentivize, to make sure that while we hold our officers to the highest possible standards, and we are constantly looking forward and evolving and changing, that we do acknowledge the difficulty of the job and we try to provide some reasonable support. So the bill that we introduced is similar to one that's been done in Howard County, which provides a tax credit to first responders, not just Montgomery County police officers, but to fire and rescue personnel as well, where we were also having recruitment and retention issues. And it provides a tax credit for up to $2,500. That was done through enabling legislation in our state legislature, where they acknowledge the challenge we're having across the state and really across the country in recruitment and retention issues. So it is, by many accounts, a best practice to have our first responders live in the communities that they serve, where they establish relationships, where they better know their neighbors, their broader community. And so and it's for 5 years as a recruitment tool in particular. We also have to look at salaries and compensation to keep pace with other jurisdictions. Again, using reasonable as our barometer, but try and provide meaningful support that I think will go a long way in helping address some of those recruitment and retention issues. Not perfect, and we know that there are many other categories of positions, including nurses, including teachers and social workers, that we are hemorrhaging right now too, because of the pandemic and people who are just exhausted. And I've had some preliminary conversations with my colleagues in Annapolis about seeing if we can expand the tax credit in future years to other critical categories. The term first responder, in my opinion, has really expanded in these last 2 years in particular. So those are some of the measures that I'll be working on. The last I'll mention for right now is the area of mental health. Oh my goodness, the kinds of cases that we're seeing in the community right now are truly tragic. And we are seeing a record number of cases rise to a clinical level, and we don't have enough clinicians. And so officers are put in an even further challenging position because they're not mental health specialists. They have a lot of training as compared to other jurisdictions, but it's still It doesn't come close to a doctorate degree or a PhD or a master's degree in social work that takes more than 10 years to be able to secure. So expecting them to take a course over something like 40 hours is just, it's always going to fall short. So again, Councilmember Hucker and I did co-introduce legislation to expand our crisis intervention teams, and the county executive has further expanded them from there. That's an area, as both chair of the HHS committee and serving on the public safety committee, I'm the only council member that serves on both committees. So it's an interesting perch and perspective, and one, especially with what's happened over the last couple of years, is going to be really important. So that will be another area of focus that I'll be targeting as well. So I could say so much more. I've only got 2 minutes left before I got to go join this panel, which again, I'm super late for. But I, again, just can't appreciate all of you enough. And you are being heard. Your work is incredibly important and valued by all of us, including my colleagues, all of us. And we look forward to the ongoing dialogue moving forward as well.
Thank you, Council President Albornoz. We really appreciate your time and really your insight in this particular bill. We won't take more of your time. We know you have to go on this panel, but thank you so much. And we'll schedule the second part of this conversation.
Great. I look forward to it. I'll be back, I promise. Thanks, everybody. Stay safe.
Thank you. And Lillian, Ms. Cruz, thank you so much for joining us. I know you have been on a couple of our calls. We really appreciate that interest and that participation from council folk. I think is really important for our work. So without any further ado, we'll be referring this bill to the Hiring and Discipline Subcommittee. If anybody has any abstention or want to not send it over there, speak now. Seems like everybody's in agreement. Great.
I'm sorry. What is the question you're asking us, Nadia?
Is it okay for us to send this particular bill to the Hiring and Discipline Subcommittee if anyone has anything to say or they think we should be sent somewhere else? This would be the time.
So just a point of clarification. I think Council President Albornoz is talking about Bill 3921, the taxation, public safety officer, public safety, emergency communication, especially property tax credit. So that's a bill that's already been reviewed by the Hiring Discipline Subcommittee, and they provided recommendations.
Yeah, that's the one we just voted on. Yeah,
right.
We're talking about the
4921.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
but I move that we send the bill to the subcommittee.
Okay. Any second?
Second.
All right. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All against? None. Okay, great. Okay, so we'll move on to new business. Does anyone have any new business to add? Jen?
If you haven't seen it yet, or if you've only heard little pieces about it, I do suggest listening to Governor Hogan's press conference today about all of the policing, and he's got a lot of stats and a lot of statewide numbers and things happening in other parts of the country too, since this committee is also very aware of other things that are happening in other states. It was just really surprising to me and interesting about the rise in crime to this type of a level where he's having to step in. That's the only thing I have.
Thank you, Jen. Ms. Branson, I know you have your hand up as well. Go ahead.
Yes, I wanted to know from Susan or Carlos whether there was any update on filling the vacancies.
Yeah, so today, so the application period is closed. The council received, I think, 24 or 27 applicants. We are going to send the council this week kind of an outline of how the vetting process will go. And then they will review all the applications. They will begin to interview, but I don't know the specific timeline and how quickly they will be able to do that.
Thank you. And those 24 or so cover both, or because the other one is filled by the county executive, right?
Right, and I don't have very much information on that, but I'll follow up with the folks that were leading that effort, and I'll update the pack on that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Carlos, and thank you, Ms. Branson. That's an important question to keep a track of. Any other new business? All right, so I will move to adjourn.
Seconded.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Any against? All right, it was short and simple.
Good chairing, Nadia.
Thank you.
I'm sorry again, I sound horrible. Y'all take care out there, it's very scary.
Take
Feel
care.
better, Nadia.
Y'all have a good one.
Bye-bye.
Bye.